Today, we're digging into the trillion-dollar AI gamble.
So get this. Sam Altman, OpenAI's CEO, gets asked a perfectly reasonable question. How exactly is your company going to spend trillions of dollars that it doesn't have? The world was expecting, a business plan. What they got instead sounded a lot like a threat. If you want to sell your shares, I'll find a buyer for you. Now that's a deeply unsettling answer. It doesn't sound like confidence. It sounds like he's just dismissing a very, very serious question.
And that really brings us to the core puzzle we're going to unpack today. How can a company that is just burning through cash, we're talking losing billions of dollars, turn around and make commitments to spend trillions? This isn't just some business school case study. This is a massive, high-stakes gamble that could honestly affect the entire global economy.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we're going to look closer at Altman's, let's call it persuasive power. Then, we'll dive into the insane AI arms race that's forcing this huge bet. Third, we'll get into the really weird financial strategy OpenAI is using. And finally, we're going to have to ask the big question. Is this whole thing just a house of cards?
So let's get right into it. Part 1, the unsettling answer, and the guy at the center of it all, who might just be the salesman of the century.
I mean, just look at the difference here. On the left, that's Sam Altman back in 2019, literally saying, the honest answer is we have no idea how we're going to make money. He was even joking that he'd just ask a future super intelligent AI to write a business plan for him. Now, fast forward to 2025, that exact same company is promising to spend $1.8 trillion. How do you go from no idea to a number that massive? That's the leap we need to understand.
And here's the secret. Altman isn't really selling a product, he's selling a promise. His whole strategy is to convince the world's biggest companies that OpenAI is about to discover this incredible treasure, what they call artificial general intelligence, or AGI. An AI that can think and learn just like a human. And he's gotten them to pay for the entire treasure hunt based on faith alone.
All right, let's move on to our second section, because this is where the pressure really starts to build. The AI arms race, and how the entire game completely changed right under OpenAI's feet.
This timeline tells a really dramatic story. So, November 2022, ChatGPT just explodes onto the scene. The world is shocked, and Google is absolutely terrified. They scramble to release their own version, Bard, and it's a total disaster. It wipes out $100 billion of their stock value. For a little while, OpenAI looks untouchable. But then, by November 2025, the tables have completely flipped. Google launches Gemini 3, and pretty much everyone agrees it's better. A month later, OpenAI is in full-on panic mode, declaring a code red just to try to catch up.
And that brings us to this quote from The Atlantic. OpenAI seems like just another chatbot company. That special, one-of-a-kind technological lead they had, poof, it's gone. Now they're just one player among many in a super expensive, brutal arms race.
And that constant pressure to keep up leads us right into Section 3, and to the absolute core of this whole financial puzzle, a strategy built on using other people's money.
First, let's just get our heads around the numbers. In just the first half of 2025, OpenAI lost $13.5 billion. That's not just a startup burning cash, that is a full-blown financial bonfire. They spent more than 3 times what they brought in.
And yet, even with those staggering losses, that very same company has somehow locked in $1.8 trillion in future spending from its partners. So how in the world is that even possible?
Well, this is how. Just look at this list. It's basically the entire Mount Rushmore of big tech. Broadcom, Oracle, Microsoft, Nvidia, all of them are putting up hundreds of billions of dollars to build the chips and the data centers that OpenAI needs to compete. They're all hitching a massive piece of their own future to OpenAI's wagon. And this right here, this is the whole game. An OpenAI executive basically said it out loud. Their strategy is to figure out how OpenAI can leverage other people's balance sheets. To put it simply, OpenAI gets other companies to take on all the debt and all the risk. OpenAI gets the gear it needs to stay in the fight, and its partners are the ones left holding the bag.
Which brings us to our final and maybe most important section, is this whole thing a house of cards? Let's talk about the systemic risk this creates for everyone.
So why should any of us really care about this? Well, let's just walk through the domino effect. Step 1. Faith in OpenAI starts to crack. It can't pay its bills. Suddenly, you've got partners like Oracle and Microsoft stuck with hundreds of billions in debt for specialized data centers with no main customer. Their stocks would tank, sending a wave of fear through the whole tech industry. And the banks that lent all that money, they'd be looking at catastrophic losses.
That's what financial contagion looks like.
And look, this isn't just some theory. The credit rating agency Moody's has been warning about this web of dependency. The numbers on this slide are just wild. For a company like Oracle, 2/3 of its future commitments are tied to OpenAI. For Microsoft, it's almost half their order backlog. OpenAI isn't just another customer for these guys. It's become a central part of their own financial health.
NYU professor Scott Galloway puts it really bluntly. He says a collapse of OpenAI would cause a comprehensive structural shock with nowhere to hide for investors in global markets. In other words, the fallout wouldn't just be contained to Silicon Valley, it would ripple out and affect everyone.
And that leaves us with one final, very troubling question. By weaving itself this deeply into the fabric of the entire tech industry, has OpenAI, a private company that loses billions, basically made itself too big to fail? And what happens when a multi-trillion-dollar bet is resting entirely on the promise of just one man?